Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Stephanie Reads. Today, we are going to be doing my February wrap-up. So, I hope you're ready to... Well, I startled myself.
I was startled as well.
Yeah. I hope you're ready to hear about the books that I read in February. So, the first book I read was Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow. And this is by Jessica Townsend. It's the start of a series. And I'm not sure how many books there are supposed to be. I think there's two for sure out now. And I think a third one's on the way. And maybe it's supposed to be a trilogy. I'm not sure. This book is 461 pages. But you can see it's kind of small. It's not like a full size, around. So it was, and it's middle grade. So it was a super easy read. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. The premise of the book is this girl named Morrigan Crow grew up being told that she was cursed, and every bad thing or even remotely not great thing that happened in her whole town was blamed on her. So her whole life she's been told she's going to die on her 11th birthday. And it comes, and she's actually rescued by this kind of magical guy, and he whisks her off to a land called Nevermore, where she is trying to get into this society. And so she has to go through these trials, and they eliminate people. And of the 500, I think, people that are going up for this society, only 9 are allowed in each year. So they have to go through these trials and then whittle it down to the top 9 people. So the book is about her learning about this new world and kind of accepting that she wasn't actually cursed, even though she still feels like she's bringing bad upon the people around her, and going through these trials. And then there's kind of a big reveal at the end. And I mean, this is not a groundbreaking book. I didn't read it and think, holy cow, that was the best thing I've ever read. But
Language.
It was... Holy cow. It was really enjoyable. It is... And, keep in mind, it is a middle grade book, so the language is simpler. The storyline is not quite as dense or twisty as, it might be for an adult book. But it still had a lot of richness to it, and I enjoyed all of the characters. I thought they were all well drawn, but also their character development didn't drag the book down. It still had a really good pace to it. So I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to read the second one. The only reason I haven't is because I didn't realize the third one wasn't out yet. So I'm kind of maybe I'll wait a little bit, because if it ends on a cliffhanger, I'm going to have a long wait, and I don't want that. Because this one didn't really end. I mean, there was a big reveal at the end, and so you're not sure where they're going to go with that, but it wasn't a legit cliffhanger. So I feel like I'm better off waiting until the third one's out and then trying to read the second one. This is my strategy. Okay, so that was Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. The next book I read, I did the audiobook version of, and that is The Hero of Ages, which is the third book in the Mistborn trilogy, which is, by Brandon Sanderson, in case you hadn't seen any of my other videos where I talk about it. So this was the concluding book. It's also narrated by Michael Kramer, who does a really good job. They're not my favorite audiobooks of all time, but they were very good. So I don't know how I feel about this book, because it was a very good end to the series, but so many people die. So many people die, you guys. And I'm not going to say who, and a lot of the people aren't even named. It's just and we lost a third of our army, and 7,000 people died in this, whatever. And so many people died. She says as she laughs. And I'm
good.
Yeah.
How many people died, though?
A lot of people died.
A
lot of people died. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of characters die as well. So it was a really good end, but I was bummed out. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, that was rough, guys. It is definitely the end the series deserved. So I don't really have any complaints. I just, like I said, it made me a little sad because a lot of people died. A lot of people died. I still think the first book in the trilogy is my favorite, though. Like, I gave that one a 5-star, and I did give this one a 5-star as well on Goodreads because you can't do, like, fractions, but this one was probably more like 4.25.
I can't do fractions sometimes either.
I was told there'd be no math. But yeah, this was like 4.25, maybe 4.5. So I guess really I probably should have given it a 4-star, but anyway, there you have it. So I enjoyed the series overall. Overall, I would give this series like a 4.5 star. So, and the first book was like a solid 5. There you go. Now, the next book I read, I also did on audiobook, and it's Lair of Dreams, which is the second book in the Diviners trilogy. It's by Libba Bray, and it's narrated by January Lavoie. The first one was one of the best audiobooks I'd ever heard. Just, I mean, like, the book itself was amazing, but the audiobook part of it was so well done. The audio, like, January Lavoie continues to crush it. So the audiobook I have no issues with. This book, though, I did give it 4 stars because overall I thought the story was good. However, if you saw my wrap up when I talked about the first book, I mentioned that the main character is not very likable. She's super self-involved. She's just kind of overall a terrible person, but she has a bunch of growth and becomes a much more likable person by the end of the book. This book starts out and she's worse than she started off in the first book. And instead of her growing as a person and getting better throughout the book, she actually gets worse. So by the end of the book, I was actually rooting for the monsters in the subway to eat her. She was so, like, every scene with her was just painful. And I was like, how have the other characters not, like, clued into this and just stopped being her friend? Like, I don't get it. Why would anybody want to be around her? She's horrible. And then, to make it even worse, you know how much I love triangles, she says sarcastically. She's like the center of a love parallelogram. It's not even, there's so many people involved. It's not even a triangle at this point. There's like this person, these two guys both like her. She likes both of them, but her best friend is in love with one of them. And I'm like, she's the least interesting person ever. Ever. She's not interesting. And she is whiny and self-centered, flaky. Like, there is no redeeming quality about her. Why is she the center of this love mishmash? I don't get it. So I just found that so tedious because every time the two guys are like getting ready to duke it out over her, all I could do is roll my eyes and think, why? Why would anybody like her? She's horrible. So the redeeming factor of this book was that she wasn't really the main character anymore. She was the main character in the first one, and she's still in this one a lot. But one of the secondary characters from the first book is really the focus of this one. So I was able to deal with it because she's not the main focus of the book. I just didn't enjoy any of the scenes she's in at all, or any of her story arc. So I did give this one a 4 stars. Really, it's like 3.75, which bumps me out because I loved the first book.
Rounding up, it's basically a 5.
My husband has some really interesting math. So yeah, I hope, I'm reading the third one now, but I'm not very far into it, so I'm really hoping things get better because this trilogy started off so strong, and at this point I'm like, we're rapidly going downhill. So we'll see. I'm hoping it redeems itself in the end. Okay, so the next book that I read was The Library Book. That is the title of the book, The Library Book.
Very confusing.
It is very confusing. When I started working at the library, they were asking me about something, like one of my recent reads or whatever, and I was like, oh, I read The Library Book, like, because I had started it and didn't finish it.
First base.
And they were like, which library book? And I'm like, The Library Book. And they're like, which library book? And I'm like, no, the title is The Library Book. And then they were like, oh. So The Library Book by Susan Orlean, who also wrote The Orchid Thief, I believe is the title of it. Now, I did this one on audiobook, which I probably shouldn't have because it's narrated by the author, who is like a female Ben Stein.
Bueller.
And so my phone,
Use clear eyes.
my phone automatically connects to the Bluetooth in my car. And so if I have recently been listening to my audiobook, when I get in the car, it just automatically starts playing. And if you've got the car in reverse, all of the controls disappear, so you can't pause it or whatever. So I had my husband in the car. I put the car in reverse to back out of the driveway, and it starts playing. And he's like, what are we listening to?
Fell asleep.
And then he fell asleep in the 3 seconds it took to back out of the driveway.
It's pretty impressive, actually.
So I did not enjoy this book. And I feel like it's a portion of the reason I didn't enjoy this book was because I did it on audiobook, and she's like the worst narrator ever.
How do you really feel about the narration?
I feel like it was one of the worst narrators I've ever heard. So,
You're a bad person.
yeah, I had issues with the book itself, though, because, so, the blurb about the book is that basically she kind of goes and investigates the fire that burned down, well, not burned down, but gutted the Central Library branch of LA Library back in 1986, I think it was, and kind of does a history of the LA Library. And I was like, well, that sounds cool. It got really good reviews. And it's almost like if you sat down with someone and said, quick, tell me everything you've ever learned about a library, and they just like stream of consciousness give it to you. There were tangents that she would go down, and I would be like, how did we get here? How does this have anything to do with the library? And we'd be on it for, 15 minutes or something because I'm doing audiobook. And then she would sort of like really work to make it like tie it back into the library. And I just found it really hard to follow because it was just all over the place. A lot of the stuff she talked about I didn't really care about and didn't really connect to the library in any sort of sensical way. And the only reason, because I started this back in like November or December, and it's only like an 8-hour library. It's only like an 8-hour audiobook, so it's not very long because a lot of the ones I do are like 20 hours plus. And in the 21 days I had it, I was unable to finish the 8-hour book. I only got like halfway through. I had almost 4 hours, or maybe it was 12 hours. I don't know. Maybe I got 8 hours into it and had 4 hours left. I don't know, but it's not very long. And like the book itself is only 310 pages. So not a long book. Yeah. So it's got such a long wait list. It auto turned back in at the end of my loan period. And then in February, I finally got it back and finished it. And the reason I decided to go ahead and finish it is because so many of the weird little tidbits that are mentioned in this book have come up in my job. Not as like, oh, I'm glad I knew that because it helped me in my job, but just kind of like, oh, that's cool because I've also experienced X, Y, or Z, whatever. That I thought, well, I might as well finish reading it. I only have 4 hours left. It is not much of a commitment. But yeah, I did not personally enjoy this book. However, it has like a 4.13 or something like that on Goodreads. So it is very highly reviewed. So I understand that me not liking this is not the norm. So I don't want to dissuade you if you were looking at it and you thought, well, that sounds super interesting. You know, it just wasn't for me. I did not appreciate the writing style. Now, she used to write for the New Yorker, which kind of makes more sense because I think maybe she was writing stuff like it was like articles. But then she was like, oh, I have to actually make things connect. And so the connections were really like tenuous and like didn't really make a lot of sense. I think if she had just specifically been like, this chapter is about this and this chapter is about this, I think I would have actually liked that better than trying to make it one continuous narrative that was just like all over the place. Much like this video. So anyway, yeah, I gave it 3 stars. I found, like, writing style-wise, I probably would have given it, like, a 1 star, but I thought a lot of the information in there was super interesting, so I bumped it up to 3 stars, but really, I didn't really like it. So, the last book I read this month, or, well, last month, was King of Scars, not Stars, by Leigh Bardugo.
I thought that would have been better.
It wouldn't have made any sense for the story, though.
I don't care. It would have been better.
This one just came out. I don't know the actual date, but it came out at the end of January. I have mixed feelings about this book. I did give it 4 stars. My issue was I thought this was a standalone book. Now, it's set in the Grisha universe, and it is basically a compilation of a bunch of secondary characters that turned out to be super popular from other books. They've now been given like their own story in this, which I was excited about because I really liked Nikolai and I really liked Nina, who are the 2 main characters of this, or 2 of the main characters, I should say. And so I was super excited to read about them. However, it turns out that this is the first book in a duology. So this book ends up being basically nothing but setup. Nothing happens. And you're like, how does nothing happen in, 527 pages? And nothing does. It basically is an entire book of them going, oh, our situation's getting worse. Oh, hey, our situation's getting worse. Our situation has gotten worse. Let's try and do something about it. Well, that didn't work. Our situation is still getting worse. And then at the end, they're like, we resolve to do something about this. I have a plan. And then the book ends. And you're like, what? Now, I still enjoyed it. The writing style was still wonderful. I really enjoyed watching the characters. There's not really a lot of character development in this. The author kind of relies on what you've learned about the characters from other books. Not to say that the story doesn't develop around them some, which affects them, but there's not, like, you already know the characters, so there's not a lot of time spent on character development for them. And there's not a ton of world development either because this is the 6th book in this world. So you're like, well, what happens? And I can't even describe it. I'm not sure. Like, literally the entire book is just...
Did you read the book?
I did read the book. I did read the book. Yeah, it's just a bunch of them kind of trying to figure out what's going on. And they kind of figure out by the end what's going on, but now they actually need to do something about it. So that's what happens. And so I was like, I'm reading along, thinking, not realizing this is a duology. And I'm like, I only have this much left, and we haven't even remotely begun to, like, wrap this up. I only have this much left. What's going on? I have this much left. And then I got to the last page, and I was like, what? And then I was like, oh, shoot. This is a duology, and this is the first book. Honestly, this didn't even feel like the first book in a duology. This felt like the first book in at least a trilogy. Because, it was almost 600 pages just of setup. So how they're supposed to completely, like, sort everything out in another 600, we're assuming, page book is kind of beyond me.
What?
100.
I heard that correctly.
Yeah. So I gave the book 4 stars. Because it was still a super enjoyable book. I still enjoyed watching these characters, like, do their thing. But it wasn't a 5-star because it was a whole lot of nothing happening. Now, I don't want to make it sound like you shouldn't read this because absolutely...
That's what I feel like.
I still enjoyed it. If you enjoy Nina and you enjoy Nikolai, I think you're probably still going to like this book. But go into it knowing that, like, the situation, none of the situations are resolved. None of them. Because, yeah, that was unexpected. And I was like, what is going on?
It's like when I first saw The Lord of the Rings and didn't realize it was supposed to be a trilogy.
Yeah, that is exactly... that is exactly it.
You got a lot to wrap up.
We're like 2.5 hours in and they haven't made any progress.
Oh, ways from that mountain.
Yeah, so I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't want to make it sound like I didn't. It just is coming, like the whole book is just them coming to terms with their situation, basically. And like fully grasping the depth of how terrible everything is. And
Everything is not awesome.
no, everything is not awesome. Be forewarned if you're going to read this book, which, you know, if you enjoyed the other ones, I definitely think you should. But yeah, I definitely would have had a more pleasant experience, I think, had I realized what was going on. So there you go. All right, guys, those
How
are...
all of life works.
Thank you, John Mulaney. All right, guys, those are all of the books I read in February. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. And until next time, happy reading.
It doesn't squeak.
It kind of creaks. No, this is way more detailed than I need to go into. Let's see. I wrote it down here. I just wrote January 2019. The dog is literally like snuggling into the ground. Ah, the hardwood floor. I love you so. And I will see you soon with another one. Until then, I have... Bleh. What just happened?
Broken.
Alright, we gotta do a thumbnail now. Oh, no. Dog's like, yeah!